DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And we are back. We're back with some more, but we are back with some more appetizers. We're here with some appetizers, and I'm talking about UFC 310 Pantoja versus Asakura, and that's Alexander Pantoja, the flyweight champion, versus the challenger Kaya Asakura, and that is December 7th, 2024. So this Saturday coming up, 10 Eastern, 9 Central Time at the T-Mobile Arena in Paradise, Nevada, United States. And this card kind of feels similar to UFC 309. I guess UFC 309 it kind of underperformed a little bit on the main card. I guess the only difference there is that you don't have two like legends or Hall of Famers fighting in the main event, even though one of them was past their prime, should have been in the retirement home in Stipe Miocic. But this card's kind of similar to that, is because it just has the one title bout, the one flyweight title bout, and then a couple seems more like title eliminators. Only one of them on some of these websites that I'm looking at have the co-main event, Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Io Machanagari. Only some of the sites that I've seen and some of the videos that I've watched are saying that's a UFC welterweight title eliminator bout. So that may be a 5-round bout, even though it's just the co-main event and it's not the main event. But I think I honestly want to see. I don't really see why not. That the Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov fight wouldn't be like a heavyweight eliminator bout, even though I don't know how many. And I know that was like almost like 3 years ago, but I don't know how many people really want to see Cyril Gane versus John Jones again. If John Jones is even gonna defend the belt now that he's beaten pretty much everyone that he needs to. But this card, kind of explaining how this card is kind of like UFC 309 and different from UFC 308, because UFC 308 it was in Saudi Arabia. Majority of the fighters on the card were either from Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, or were from Russia. So it's they're kind of the top three fights had like fighters that were notable, but then it's a lot of fighters from the Middle East and Russia, so there wasn't as many like notable names for your lowly casuals, your common casuals, to be like, oh well, I notice all these names, but there's a lot of them on this card, and not just the main card, but the preliminary card and the early prelims even. So I'll just name off some of those real quick. So Clay Guida fighting at lightweight. You got welterweight, Michael Chiesa fighting, and that's all on on the early prelims. You got Cody Durden fighting at flyweight, and then you got a catchweight of 195 between Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. So that's just I mean, there's notable names in almost every single fight on the early prelims of UFC 310. And then preliminary card, you have the second fight on that card, this featherweight bout between Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. Who Aljamain Sterling, I mean, just like a year or two ago, he was right up there with being either the co-main event or the main event on like every UFC numbered card. But now he's down to the lowly prelims. And then you got Vincent Lequi fighting that welterweight, and then you have the main event for the preliminary card is a light heavyweight bout between Dominic Reyes and, everybody knows my favorite fighter, it's sarcasm a bit there, with Anthony Smith, who's still fighting after the beating that he was given a couple of years back, by by let's see, Glover Teixeira, where he was just beaten to death. Talk about an early stoppage, how that he's even continued his career after as bad a beating as that was, and how that's pushing up on 5 years ago. So yeah, my favorite guy. You got a great main event, at least like maybe like 10 years ago. That right there could have been a co-main event, like light heavyweight title can eliminator bout between light heavyweight Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. Time continues. It's continuous. It stops for nobody, as you can see reading off a lot of these notable or past their prime, or past uh, past their potential even, for some of these fighters just on the prelim card. But anyways, let's get to the main card now. So we've gone over how the preliminary card has, well, it's just alone. It's good enough fights on it consistently from top to bottom. It's as good as the fight night. So heck, there's a good chance I'll probably end up watching a lot more of this than I usually do on pay-per-view events. But anyways, let's get into the main card now. That's what we're here for. So can I get a menu? And so the first fight on the card is a featherweight bout between late Nanware versus Du Ho, and this seems kind of a fight that's a little bit set up. This happens. It seems like a lot on these cards lately, where it's they specifically match up these fighters that have like a similar striking skill, and that's kind of both like Nate Landwehr there and what is it, Do Ho Choi, Choi Do Ho. They're both like strikers, but they have the mixed martial arts and the wrestling skills, but both of them are majority of their wins have come by knockout. And Nate Landwehr, he is 4-2 in his last 6 fights, or maybe if we just go, he's 5-1 in his last 5 fights, I guess, if we were just to go off the last 5 fights. And in his last fight against Jamal Emmers, he got a KO win in the first 4:43 of the first round of that fight, and that was March 30th, 2024, at a fight night. But in his 23 matches, he has 18 wins, 5 losses. In the 18 wins, 9 of them have come by knockout, 2 of them by submission, and 7 by decision. In the 5 losses, he's been knocked out twice, and he's been submitted once, and he's lost 2 by decisions. But he's a striker. Nate Landwehr and Choi Do Ho, they're both strikers. But Landwehr, he's kind of like he kind of throws reckless abandonment and kind of comes rushing in, throwing like heavy shots, and if he doesn't connect on them, then he's willing to try to clinch up and try to push up on you and hold you against the cage and do dirty boxing from that position. But yeah, he's a striker, but Choi Do Ho is as well. So that's what will probably lead this to being an exciting fight and an interesting fight. And this is also what kind of leaves it as kind of interesting is Chu Do Hoi. He was like retired for what, 3 4, yeah, like 3 or 4 years, because he had like a 3 fight losing streak there, and then he took off and didn't come back. His fight, the last fight of his losing streak, where he lost 2 fights uh, in a row. He lost actually 3 fights in a row. He lost to Cub Swanson, and then was knocked out by Jeremy Stevens, uh, and then knocked out by Charles Jourdain. and that was December 21st, 2019 at a fight night. And then he didn't come back to fight until he came back in 2023, February 4th, and lost or what was in a majority draw with Kyle Nelson. And then his most recent fight was against Bill Algeo, uh, which was which he won by submission TKO punches, and that was July 20th, 2024. So if you're just going off of his last five fights, he's won three and one. So that's one win, three losses, and one draw. So that's kind of part of the reason why I'm leaning towards Nate Landwehr here is just because Choi Do Ho, before he took his little vacation or his little mini retirement or his break from fighting, it was because he was getting knocked out, and I guess that's part of it, wanting to take a little break from getting knocked out so many times in a row. But I think because he they both are strikers. I think that's going to kind of play into Nate Landwehr, who's having a little bit better of a career arc at the moment. So feather for the first fight on the main event, UFC 310, the featherweight bout between Nate Landwehr versus Chu Du Ho. I think I'm going to go with Nate Landwehr to win this, and I think it's going to be a fun, exciting fight for however long it lasts. But I'm thinking Landwehr is going to win this. I think he's going to win by knockout, either being TKO or KO, just punches, knockout. And those two previous fights where he lost by knockout, they both came in the second round. So let's say second round KO win or knockout win, KO or TKO win by Nate Landwehr over Chu Du Ho. All right. So now then on to the second fight on the card. It's a featherweight bout between Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. And Bryce Mitchell, he's not too far from me, being in Texarkana, Arkansas. Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. So kind of shout out for him for that. But I don't know if I'm necessarily gonna pick him as my winner for this fight. If I was just talking about for Choi Do Ho about how it seemed like he kind of took a break after losing two fights by knockout TKO, as if he needed some time to like heal and refresh and recover. Well, that might be kind of the reason why I don't pick Bryce Mitchell here. I just don't see how you could have a chin left after the brutal KO knockout that he took from Josh Emmett. One of the most devastating and one of the longest times that a fighter has been laid out on the canvas after a knockout. I just don't know how you could have a chin anymore. And that was almost close to almost a year ago since he fought and got knocked out so bad by Josh Emmett. That was December 16th, 2023 at UFC 296, and that came at 157 of the first round. And even leading into that, he was three and three, yeah, 3-2 with having his other loss of his first loss of his career come from Ilia Taboria, the champion. He got submitted on arm trial and so by Ilia Tapora, who's just an absolute unit, a damn Terminator. So that you can't. I don't know how much you can hold against him on that, or even the loss to Josh Emmett. Even though I just don't know how much of a chin he has left after that. But Bryce Mitchell, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, like black belt, and prefers to rely on his submission game. I said that he was 3-2 in his last five fights. He's had 18 matches with 16 wins and two losses. In the 16 wins, he has no wins by knockout. So it's clear that he doesn't really rely on his striking game. He's just like an elite ground game and submission artist. And then has 9 wins by submission and 7 by decision. And then just the two losses, he has that devastating straight up KO, uh, left him slumped and left him twisted on the canvas after the knockout by Josh Emmett. And then, that was probably before, back in 2022, anyone knew how great Ilia Topuria was. He got submission arm triangle, and then he's never lost by decision. So I'm just kind of looking at if I believe or think that Bryce Mitchell has much of a chin anymore. And for this being the first fight back after taking such a devastating knockout, I think it's a really good fight for him and Kron Gracie, because Kron Gracie is pretty much just a ground fighter, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu submission grappler. So he's not known for like his knockout striking or his great boxing or anything like that. And he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights, and he is on a 2-fight losing streak to Cub Swanson and Charles Jourdain. He's both on a losing streak, both of those fighters, but only just it's a little different than getting choked out by Ilia Topuria and completely starched by Josh Emmett. Both of those losses came by unanimous decision, and he hasn't he's not as much of a veteran or has been fighting quite as long as Bryce Mitchell, because he only has 7 matches in his career with 5 wins and 2 losses. In the 5 wins, all 5 of them have come by submission. None by knockout, none by decision, and then the 2 losses never been submitted. So that shows that he's a great submission artist, but he also has great submission ground game because no one's submitting him, and he's got a decent chin, or he's got a decent ability to stay out of danger of taking any real hard shots because he's never been knocked out either. So never been knocked out, never been submitted, and just the 2 losses, which he's on a 2-fight losing streak, have both come by decision. And I've gone over it multiple times. I even kind of talked about kind of a similar topic with Chu Du Ho in the first fight on the card. And I just don't know how you can have any chin left after the type of knockout that Bryce Mitchell took from Josh Emmett. So in this featherweight bout between Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie, I'm going with Kron Gracie to win this, and I'm actually going to go with him to win this by knockout, and maybe even first round knockout. And it may just come from the gust of wind that goes by due to one of Kron Gracie's strikes, and that alone being enough to knock out Bryce Mitchell. So in the featherweight bout between Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie, I got Kron Gracie winning this by knockout by way of shattered jaw, which is probably already held together with duct tape and gorilla glue of Bryce Mitchell after what Josh Emmett did to him a year ago. All right. Now then, on to what we were kind of talking, these are both are kind of co-main events, the Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. I'm pretty sure like that's a welterweight title eliminator bout. So I think it's, and also because it's co-main event, I think that's a reason for it to be a 5-round fight. But I think this heavyweight, the third bout on the main card between Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov, I think it's a title eliminator too, even though it kind of leaves your head scratching, because if Cyril Gane wins, do you really want to see him again against John Jones? But I think it is as well too, because I mean, who else is really out there besides Tom Aspinall or some fighters that John Jones wants no part of? But I think can easily be considered a heavyweight title eliminator as well. But it's not a 5-round fight like the other the co-main event that's not a title bout, but is a eliminator bout. But in this heavyweight bout, this is a heavyweight bout between Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov, and these two have fought before. So I think Cyril Gahn, he's on a little bit bumpier of a trek than Alexander Volkov, who I think Volkov, he's on like a 4-fight winning streak, submitting and knocking guys out, while Cyril Gahn has had a little bit of a rougher stretch where uh, he's 3-2 with the two coming by way of a just a one being back January 22nd, 22, decision loss to Francis Ngannou, where he was just running away from him and afraid of Francis' power quite a bit in that. And then Francis, I think that was the fight where Francis Ngannou had like two knee braces on both of his knees and actually was taking Cyril Gahn down in that fight and just kind of holding him down in that fight. And then the other loss was John Jones, where John Jones just absolutely clowned him in like the just like literally the millisecond that John Jones had that guillotine choke synced in. He was like tapping like immediately. He looked like Robert Whitaker. He was tapping so fast. And that was March 4th, 2023. And that was UFC 285 by way of guillotine. But he did won his most recent fight, which was September 2nd, 2023, which was against Sergey Spivak, TKO punches. So we said he's 3-2, and Cyril Gahn, he's just like he's your K1 Muay Thai kickboxer type of fighter, and you just don't see kickboxers and heavyweights and that move and have the crisp and clean boxing that he has. That's what makes him such a dynamic and such a different, original type of fighter, But champions like Francis Ngannou and John Jones have kind of figured out the path to victory over him, and that seems to be taking him down or trying to submit him. But he's had 14 matches, 12 wins, 2 losses, and 6 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, 3 wins by decision. And then in the losses, he's never been knocked out, but he's been submitted by John Jones and lost the decision to Francis Ngannou, where he was getting like held down the entire time. But the thing about this fight is that these guys have fought before. Cyril Gahn and Alexander Volkov, they fought before, and it ended up mostly being Cyril Gahn like point striking Alexander Volkov and just looking better in the boxing. So maybe we could be in for some more of that. But if I was Alexander Volkov, after I've seen some of the losses, some of the ways that Cyril Gahn has lost, I think I would be training more on my wrestling and my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and my submission game as my path to victory over Cyril Gahn, because I don't think going in there with the exact same game plan as you did the first time would be a great decision, even though he has his own great knockout ability and probably is more of an explosive and maybe has more a one punch knockout capability than Cyril Gahn. But Cyril Gahn, he was able to avoid it really well in their first fight. But we were talking how he's on a bit of a heater, and it would definitely make a lot more sense if this is a heavyweight eliminator bout for Alexander Volkov more than Cyril Gahn, because he is on a 4-fight winning streak, and then he's 4-1 in his last 5 with the one loss back on March 19, 2022, coming to the interim champion Tom Aspinall with a straight armbar. But he's on a winning streak here. Jorino Rosenstreich knocked him out, TKO. Alexander Rachmanov, TKO. Punches, knocked both of them out. Taya Tuivasa, submission, Ezekiel choke. And Sergey Pavlovich won by decision. So he's beaten guys by knockout and submission. And I think we just mentioned, like I think Alexander Volkov. I mean, I can understand maybe in the first round or two, maybe trying out and seeing if your boxing has gotten any better, or if Cyril Gane's maybe fallen off a little bit, or maybe if you can hit him with the first power shot when you're still got as much power and are as explosive and as fast as you're going to be in the first round. Even though with boxers, or not boxers, but heavyweights, they're pretty much got knockout capability through all 5 rounds. But if it doesn't work, and it seems like Cyril Gane is gonna point strike you to death again, then I think it's probably would be time to try to go for a takedown and and see if you can hold Cyril Gane down, or get him in a submission. But he's had tons of fights for being just 36 years old. He's had 48 fights with 38 wins and 10 losses. Uh, in the 38 wins, he has 24 wins by knockout. So, I mean, I can understand why, when facing Cyril Gane, why he would want to strike with him, wants to kickbox and box with him, because, I mean, over his career, that's been his best chance and best path of victory. But it didn't work in their first fight. Uh, Cyril Gane was just a little faster and had a little bit crisper of striking, but still, wouldn't surprise me if he turns around and gets a knockout. So 24 knockouts, four wins by decision. So not that he's a great submission artist, but he can get submissions. He can get Ezekiel chokes. He can get, see, triangle chokes, rear naked chokes like that. That's probably be his best chance, in my opinion, is to get some kind of choke sunk in on Cyril Gane. And then he has 10 wins by decision. So, I mean, he can also grind out a win too, but he can also grind out a loss as well. So if he's going to try to win one of these fights, win this fight by decision, it'll probably be similar to kind of what Francis Ngannou did, which was did a little bit of like pitter patter striking with Cyril Gane to start each round, and then just try to try to dump him on his ass, and try to hold him there. And then in the 10 losses, he's only been knocked out twice, and then has been submitted 3 times, and then just 5 losses by decision. All right, so this is an interesting fight, just to see how each fighter kind of approaches it. It's kind of hard. It's hard. It seems like it's harder for the fighter that won the fight to come in and approach the fight with a different game plan than it is for a challenger, the opponent that's fought and lost already. Because, I mean, then they can just completely throw that game plan out the window. So it'd be interesting to see if Cyril Gane just sticks with his Muay Thai and his kickboxing, and if Alexander Volkov thinks that he can beat him this time like that, or if he's going to try to go for some takedowns and try to see if he can get submissions. But we've seen that, a little bit of that, from Cyril Gane and some of his fights against Sergey Spivak. There was a couple times where he looked decent and kind of stuffing the takedown. So maybe if Alexander Volkov comes in here with that, Cyril Gane will be able to defend it, even if he has that game plan. So in this heavyweight bout between Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov, I'm going with Cyril Gane. I think it's gonna be a lot of the same. And even if it's not, I think Cyril Gane has been training enough, and probably so embarrassed after that such quick loss to John Jones being submitted by a guillotine. I think that he at least has defense, takedown defense, and ground defense. Once he gets down there, it'll be a little bit different of a story to kind of see how well he can get back up, or make sure he doesn't leave his neck out there for someone to grab a hold of. But I'm going with Cyril Gane to win this, and I think he's going to win by decision. I think he's going to win by decision again, and I think Alexander Volkov may kind of try early on to try to go more to the wrestling and the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I think it'll end up getting thrown out of the window after a couple failed attempts at takedowns, and then Cyril Gane is just going to point strike him to death, and could possibly get a knockout if he lays it on thick enough in the later rounds. All right. Now then, on to the co-main event, which is a 5-round bout, which is a UFC welterweight title eliminator bout between Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. And this is something that we kind of had the last couple pay-per-views where we had some undefeated fighters, putting their undefeated streaks and just their records on the line. And you're seeing a little bit of that from Shavkat Rakhmonov, he has what, he's 18-0, and then uh, Ian Machado Gary, uh, he is 15-0, so very very similar in that regard. I would say that Ian Machado Gary is the more explosive striker with more knockout, one punch knockout capability. And then Shavkat Rakhmonov is a little more crisp and precise, but also has the great sambo and submission wrestling and combat sambo. So he on top of having pretty close to as good a striking, I would say, as Ian Machado Gary. Maybe just not as explosive, and not as wild at times. But he even has a great ground game and submission game. And so obviously he's 5-0 in his last 5 fights, and they've see here. Yeah, they've all come. All of his fights have come. All of his fights and all of his wins have come by way of stoppage. But in the last 5 fights, he's had wins by submission, rear naked choke, spinning, hook kick and punches KO, submission, guillotine choke, submission, rear naked choke, and submission, rear naked choke. So 3 submission victories in a row here, which is really impressive. And just the stoppages in general, and it's a pretty even mixture of getting submission ground game, like getting people down and getting a hold of a neck or an arm, or good striking that started off from good strikes on the ground, where he ends up finishing fights with great ground and pound too. But he's had 18 matches with 18 wins, with 8 wins by knockout and 10 wins by submission, and then 0 losses. And he's just 30 years old. And then we have Ian Machado Gary, the future, the Dublin Irishman, from and only 27 years old. So that stat there is as impressive as anything. We talked about kind of thinking that we think he's relies a little bit more on his striking game. Probably won't be the first of the two between Shavkat Rakhmonov and him to try to go for takedowns and try to go for ground and pound and submission. I think he probably wants to just keep it standing, and boxing would be boxing and kickboxing. And I think he's just a little wilder, but also is a little more explosive and has that one punch knockout ability for the 170-pound division. But I think it leaves him you kind of see kind of some looping shots that may leave him open for something, and maybe not just leave him open for a counter shot from Shavkat Rakhmonov, but maybe something that leads him into getting caught in some type of submission or taken down. I think one of Shavkat Rakhmonov's, he had like a standing head and arm triangle choke, I think. I'm trying to think of who that was, which was impressive. So heck, if he comes in throwing strikes too crazy, could get caught in something, even some type of head and arm triangle choke while they're standing. But we going over his recent record, his record here. So he's 5-0, obviously, and 15-0, and in those 5 fights, going from uh, oldest to recent, he's had 2 wins by TKO. One was just strictly punches, and the other was a head kick and punches, with finished with ground and pound. And then he's had three fights in a row that have gone decision, and I didn't think were overly impressive fights and wins over Neil Magny, Jeff Neal, and Michael Page. He just kind of, I'll admit, in those fights, he kind of just bullied both of those, all three of those fighters. But I don't think I didn't never seem like he was really like close to finishing those fights. Like he was super dominant in those fights, but he was never close to getting a knockout, or was never really seemed like he went for broke in any of those fights, but still came out with the win and keeping his record unblemished, I guess, is what matters more than anything. But in this welterweight co-main event, welterweight bout between Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary for the UFC welterweight title eliminator. I'm going with Shavkat Rakhmonov because I just feel he's got more ways of beating you. Like he has really good striking and ground and pound himself. Maybe not quite as dangerous as Ian Machado Gary, but the thing is, he has an extremely dangerous like sambo and wrestling and submission game that Ian Machado Gary really doesn't have, and really hasn't fought anyone on basically the same level as him. So he's definitely taken a step up in competition. Ian Machado Gary is. So in this welterweight bout between Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary, I'm going with Shavkat Rakhmonov to win this, and I think he's going to win by submission. I think he's going to get Ian Machado Gary in some kind of choke, and he's going to choke Ian Machado Gary out and be next in line for the welterweight championship bout. All right, now then, on to the main event, flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kaya Askarov, the challenger. And this is kind of a weird fight, because this is kind of the first like kind of where you're getting a fighter coming over from kind of a little brother company in Ryzen. I guess you kind of had some of that with Christy Cyborg and even Kayla Harrison kind of coming over, but you never really had too many fighters coming over where you thought, oh, they're the elite or they're the next champion, since like Pride and WEC with the smaller weight classes first being introduced. But that's kind of what Kai Askarov is. So he, on his first UFC fight, his UFC debut, he's getting a title shot. So that kind of tells you kind of how the talent and the roster of the flyweight bout is, that there's no one that was already on the roster that seemed good enough to fight Alex Pantoja for the bout. So we got Kaya Askarov coming over from Japan. He's Japan top team, not American top team. But he's known for being a crazy striker, with wild striking and actual pretty devastating knockout ability, even for being, what are they, 125? Is that what this weight class is? Let's see, 135. I thought they were 125. Yeah, no, this is for 125. So even being a smaller, even at the smaller weight class in the UFC, that's what he's kind of known for, coming over from Ryzen, is his crazy striking ability and knockout ability. But just within Ryzen, in his last 5 fights. He is 4-1, and he's on a 2-fight winning streak in Ryzen, where he got a KO knee to the body, and then a TKO knee to the body and punches in his last 2 fights in his two fight winning streak, and that won him the Ryzen Bantamweight Championship, I believe, and he vacated it right after winning it. That was at Ryzen 45, December 31st, 2023. And that's something he's known for. A lot of people think he has some of the best knees in the UFC, and at least some of the best UFCs in the flyweight, yeah, in the flyweight division. Because those last 2 wins that he had were all started off by some devastating knees to the body. But he's had 25 matches with 21 wins and 4 losses. In the 21 wins, he has 13 wins by knockout. So he's definitely wants to come in kind of wild, throwing crazy strikes, maybe get you in the clinch and uh, throw some devastating knees and try to finish you, try to get you to crumble, get you to fall down. But 13 knockout wins, 3 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. And then in his 4 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times before, never lost by way of submission, and then won by decision. All right, so this is kind of like your crossover, from back in the day of like Pride fighters and WEC fighters. So, and more recently like Kayla Harrison and Cyborg, coming over from other organizations, and then like right off the bat, they're almost getting a title shot, or with him, he is getting a title shot. So he's a superstar over in Japan, rising Japan top team. But we have a title champion already, a flyweight champion that's from the UFC already, is already at the top of the pinnacle, and he's on a great winning streak at the moment. He's on a 6-fight winning streak, all in the UFC, and he's had wins by submission, rear naked choke, submission, neck crank, and then all the other fights have been by decision. But just going off of like those 2 fights there on his 6-fight winning streak, that he's had some submissions. That's where I think that he's better, obviously better. He's kind of similar to Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary fighters, that both of them are really great strikers, but only one of them at least has shown that they're a great ground game and has a great submission game. And I think Alexandre Pantoja, I think he's a great striker too. I think it's just a little more crisp, a little more accuracy. Even though at the end of some of these fights, some of these great fights, performances of the nights he's been in, he lets it all go, and you start seeing him throwing crazy wild shots and just completely unloading and emptying the gas tank. But I think just fighting at a higher level and fighting at the UFC flyweight championship level, I think he just has crisper and more accurate striking, but probably doesn't have the knockout capability as Kai Askarov. But on top of having pretty good striking himself and stand up himself, he has the submission game. So he's had 33 matches with 28 wins and 5 losses. In the 28 wins, 8 of them have been by knockout, 10 of them have been by submission, and 10 have been by decision. So that shows you he can win and beat you in any type of way. And then in his 5 losses, he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, never been stopped. And just the 5 losses has just came from decision wins, decision losses where he's just been edged out by some other fighters like Davis and Figueroa, Askarov, So I think with this fight, I think I'm really taking in a lot of stock in the co-main event and the main event that the I'm guessing the favorites in these fighters have just as good striking as their opponents, but maybe just isn't quite as good and as explosive and as one punch knockout power as them, but they have just a history and a resume of ground game and wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and submission victories that their opponent, their challenger, just doesn't have. And I want to look to see what type of. So I said rear neck crank, rear naked choke, rear naked choke, rear naked choke. So submission triangle choke. So they're all most of these submissions he's getting are rear naked chokes and just chokes. So in this flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus the Japanese superstar, rising superstar, straight crossover. Some of the first straight crossovers we've had since Pride and WEC. Kaya Oskurov, the challenger. I'm going with Alexander Pantoja to win this, and even if it doesn't come by way of submission, I think that he's going to be able to put more pressure on Kaya Oskurov, and that doesn't just mean in the striking game. That comes in with just trying to push him up the cage and dirty box, try to take him down and hold him down, force him to try to get back up, and do some ground and pound. Maybe nothing that's good enough to get the stop, but enough to hold him down and get the points out of it. But still, I'm still even with that could be one of the path of victories from Alexander Pantoja, and that's kind of why I'm picking him anyways. It's just I think he has more ways of winning. I think Kyle Oskurov really his only way of beating Alexander Pantoja is probably getting a knockout. But I think Alexander Pantoja can do that, can get it to decision and get the submission as well. So in the flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kaya Oskurov, I'm going with Alexander Pantoja, the champion, to retain his belt, and I think he's going to submit Kaya Oskurov. Was looking, see, and I think that will be what the first, yeah, the first person to ever submit him. All right, so I'm excited. I'm actually more excited for this card now that I've kind of gone over the fights and kind of gone over the fighters and even kind of looked a little more into the preliminary card. It's got me really excited about this card and maybe could have had another title fight on the card, or maybe a little bit heavier of weight classes, maybe in the co-main event. Even though in the third fight on the card you have a heavyweight eliminator fight, but man, just going on, I'll probably watch this whole card honestly, just because I like all the fighters on the prelims. Most of the preliminary cards, early and just the prelims, have lots of familiar names and faces on it. But let's just go over the my picks real quick from the main card real quick. See if we see if you out there and see if I can remember who I've picked here. Let's see here. Wanting to see. I don't remember who that was that what round they had lost their first most recent fights. Okay, all right. So that's the first fight on the card. So in the lightweight, first bout on the card is a lightweight bout between Nate Landwehr versus Chu Do Ho, and they're both strikers. I think that's probably what they're both gonna try to rely on early on and see who's better. But I think Nate Landwehr, I think he's been doing a little bit better. His previous resume's been a little bit better, and Chudo Hoy with his semi-retirement and then coming back and having a draw and was on a bit of a streak of getting knocked out here, and that's something Nate Landwehr is good at. He's good at exploding and kind of just rushing in and throwing wild shots, and I think him doing that, he'll end up catching Choi Do Ho and knock him out. And he was on a bit of a streak there, Choi Do Ho, where he was getting TKO'd in the second round. So in the featherweight bout between Nate Landwehr versus Choi duo. I got Nate Landwehr winning this by TKO knockout, and I think he'll do that in the second round. All right, and then on to the second fight, we have a featherweight bout between Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie, and this should honestly this should be like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu or like a submission wrestling fight is what this should be. But I'm going off of past history of what I saw. It looked like a dead body in the ring after Josh Emmett took Bryce Mitchell out, and because of that, I think I still feel that he's has a crumbling uh, jaw made of glass. I just don't know how you heal up and repair from that. So even though Gracie isn't known for his striking or his knockouts or never even won a fight by TKO or knockout, I'm going. So in this featherweight bout between Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. I'm going with Kron Gracie to win this, and I got him winning this by literally a gust of wind going by after a punch that he throws towards Bryce Mitchell's face, and that alone being enough to knock him out. I know I'm sounding a little silly or ridiculous, but I gotta see. I gotta see that chin is still intact, even with facing a submission, a ground artist, and Kron Gracie, and this the Gracie family. And then onto the third fight on the card, which I've seen some spots show that it's a heavyweight title eliminator too, but I don't think it's a 5 round fight. We have a heavyweight bout between Cyril Gahn versus Alexander Rachmanov, and what I question is what's the game plan of Alexander Volkov coming into this? Does he try to go more for a ground game, seeing that Cyril Gahn in his last couple losses have been due to him being controlled on the ground and getting his neck caught in a guillotine choke? Would he think that maybe I need to go away from what he does so great, him being such an elite striker that was able to point strike me to death, and even when the few times trying to go to the takedown, he was able to get out of it and stand back up, and probably has done a lot better. Has trained and is a lot better than that after being embarrassed by John Jones. So that's really my question coming into this is how does Alexander Volkov approach this fight? Is he going to try it just like he did before and try to get into a kickboxing and Muay Thai fight with Cyril Gahn, or is he going to change it up and think I got to take this guy down? I either got to take him down and hold him there, or I got to take him down and try to get him in some type of submission. But I think it's going to be more of the same that we saw from the first fight, where it's just Cyril Gahn point striking and winning and keeping his distance, and Alexander Alexander Volkov just not being able to land anything clean and maybe just give up kind of on going for takedowns and maybe trying to get a submission due to Cyril Gahn being effective at stuffing takedowns, and maybe if Alexander Volkov gets him down, even being able to get back up. So in the heavyweight bout between Cyril Gahn versus Alexander Volkov, I got Cyril Gahn winning this again. I think it's going to be more of the same from their first fight, and he's going to win by decision. All right, now then on to the co-main event, the welterweight title eliminator bout, 5 round bout, 5 round bout between Shavkat Rachmanov versus Ian Machado Gary. Two strikers, two guys that love to strike. Ian Machado Gary, probably the more explosive, a little more wild striker, and Shavkat Rachmanov, a little more critiqued and a little more built off of like counter strikes, but is the one that has the dominant ground game, and not just the dominant ground game for where he's getting some finishes due to ground and pound, but also great chokes and submission that Ian Machado Gary hasn't necessarily added to his game yet. At least we haven't seen it yet. So due to them kind of canceling each other out in the striking game, even though I think Ian Machado Gary has more of the one punch knockout capability, I think it kind of cancels each other out. And I see Shavkat Rachmanov being the first one going for some takedowns and seeing if he can get any anything on standing that can kind of set anything off that can lead to him getting Ian Machado Gary in a position where he can land some ground and pound or get a hold of his neck and get a submission. So in the welterweight bout, title eliminator, 5 round bout between Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. I got Shavkat Rakhmonov winning this, and I think he's going to win by submission. I think it'll be some type of choke, a guillotine choke, rear naked choke, head and arm triangle choke. That's what I see from that, and that'll be either Ian Machado Gary or Shavkat Rakhmonov losing their first fight, or I guess it potentially could be a draw. But more than likely, you're going to see either one of those fighters get the first loss of their career. And then onto the main event, the flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja versus Kaya Asakura. And Kaya Asakura, he's a Japanese superstar coming from a crossover from Ryzen, where he's the champion, and he's known for his wild striking and his crazy knockouts and devastating knees to the head and body. But he's coming in and facing the actual UFC flyweight champion, a guy that's been through the fire and has fought obviously the best competition that the UFC has to offer, because their roster must not be that great if they're bringing someone over from another organization to be the first challenger, for that to be their first fight coming over from another organization. But I look at these fighters very similar, kind of to the co-main event, where you got two guys that are great strikers, but one of them has probably more devastating shots with their a little wild but more knockout ability, but has the great knees as well than Kaya Askarov. But Alexander Pantoja, he's a little more crisp and clean and more just boxing, with good kicks mixed in. But it's more about a counter striker and more accurate probably than Kaya Askarov, but probably not quite as devastating. But what he has that kind of pushes him above Kaya Askarov is he has the great submission game and the great ability to set off moments in fights that lead to stoppages due to like ground and pound. So he's good with the ground and pound, but he's also good with the submission games. And it was all like neck cranks and rear naked chokes and a lot of rear naked chokes. I might want to say that I see him winning this fight. I don't think when I first went over this, I said how I thought he was going to win this, but Alexander Pantoja has 10 submission wins in his career, and heck, at least half of them are rear naked chokes. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. I think just like both of these, the co and the main event, they're going to start start striking. Obviously, all fights start standing, and you're going to get to see maybe a filling out portion, maybe it just in the first round of what Alexander Pantoja and Shavkat Rakhmonov think of their striking compared to their opponents, who are known to be a little more dangerous, a little more explosive, a little more one punch knockout, and then it'll lead over to them knowing like I can take this guy down and dominate this fight and dictate where it is anywhere during the fight. So so the flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Kaya Askarov, the challenger, the Ryzen flyweight champion coming over. I got Alexander Pantoja, and that's just because I feel as if he's fought better competition, but also has a more rounded game just in general, but just a dominantly more history and skill on the ground, whether it's stoppages due to ground and pound or submission. So I got Alexander Pantoja retaining his belt, the champion, the flyweight champion, retaining his belt, and I think he's going to do that by rear naked choke. So we got a couple of these listed by method and even the submission type. So that's UFC 310. UFC 310 Pantoja versus Askurov, or UFC 310 Alexander Pantoja versus Kai Askarov. And we mentioned that that's Saturday coming up, uh, December 7th, 2024, 10 Eastern, 9 Central Time, T-Mobile Arena, Paradise, Nevada, United States. And I'm excited for it. Even though there aren't as many big names on the card. I mean, there are. It's kind of guys that are kind of on the cusp of being like superstars. Definitely like this kind of depends on where the fight goes. With Ian Machado, Gary, and Savkat Rakhmonov, and same with Kai Askarov. He could bring his fame that he's built in Japan over here with a win in his first bout, winning the flyweight championship, and then Cyril Gahn. He looked like the new predator, the new mold of the new evolution of a heavyweight before he got taken out by Francis Ngannou and then embarrassed by by John Jones. So there's potential and there's names there, but just the entire card itself has a lot of entertainment and watch value and names to it. So really, the last thing for it to do is to have some impressive fights on the main card, some crazy finishes, and if they do go to decision, hopefully they're barn burners. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?